All right, thank you. We are live here now at the special meeting of the City Council. Councilwoman Urban, if you will give us the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, sir. To the maker of the heavens and the earth, we thank you for this precious day. We thank you for life, for health, and for strength. We welcome you into this meeting today, that you will lead us and guide us with all wisdom and knowledge, that each and every decision that is made today will be for the betterment of this city and its citizens, which would also make us better neighbors, but also positioning us for a future of prosperity in all levels for this city. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
The order of business today is a special meeting for the purpose of receiving information and discussion on the pending rental registry ordinance. Tonight, of course, is a work session and a work session alone. There won't be any votes taken tonight. And council will meet twice more on this subject in order to have the opportunity for council to debate it among itself and to act on the ordinance. However, tonight is an opportunity for staff to make some presentations to us, members to ask questions, and for members of the public to provide input. This is all via Zoom, and so we are learning as we go, as it were, with regard to this technology, but we've got a number of people who have signed up, and staff has arranged for them to be able to participate via Zoom. Of course, we've had some public participation in meetings before via Zoom to this extent, and so we will find our way through it. Before we move on, though, to the input from the public, we have, I believe Mr. Moore will present on behalf of staff the ordinance. Am I right, Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Very well.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. In your packets, you should have received the ordinance. The rental is named the Single Family and Multifamily Residential Rental Housing Ordinance, along with two step-by-step guides on how to register your property, as well as a summary that kind of goes over the ordinance, some of the background and everything involved in that. And then additionally, there is a packet for frequently asked questions. At this point, most of the public has been given the ordinance. They've been allowed to take a look at that. I know we've had many meetings and discussions with stakeholders on this. So I want to start sharing my screen here in just a moment, and I'll go through the ordinance as a whole, try to keep that as brief as I can. It is a pretty thick ordinance, but allow time for discussion with council and then also those that we have calling in.
We won't have time tonight to talk about the Clemson Citadel game, buddy. I'm afraid. I'm sorry to tell you.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I was looking forward to that.
Hit okay? Okay. All right. So before you tonight is the rental registry, the short name of the single family and multifamily residential rental housing registration. I think it's best that we talk about some of the early initiatives that have occurred that support this document and those items that we've kind of gone over from early 90s, where there were some early initiatives by the mayor at the time, along with city staff, helped develop some of the court and how we proceed with livability court and some of those things. In 2010, we adopted the comprehensive plan, which directly identifies a rental registry as one of those items to further to take Florence and to help stabilize those neighborhoods. In 2013, we produced a neighborhood action plan, which led into our neighborhood revitalization strategy in 2014. Both of those documents looked at our northwest and east Florence neighborhoods and identified a rental registry as one of those items to help move us forward and help stabilize those neighborhoods. In 2014, we received the second penny sales tax money, where we started investing multiple millions in streetscape work along Sumter, Pine Street, Vista Street. In 2017, we took the building inspections back within the municipal limits to help us kind of focus in on those areas where we have dilapidated buildings and other issues involved in building construction. In 2017, we reinvested, we took a bond to reinvest in our parks and facilities. It started with the Dr. Isla Jones facility, as well as in Maple Park. And then in that same year, we also started investing in some of the new homes to help establish the market along Vista Street and Sumter Street, and looking forward onto Pine Street. So again, a rental registry is recommended by all of our planning documents, and it builds upon all the things that we're currently doing with work, the investment in the new homes, the community outreach that we do, and a rental registry takes that is to the next step. So city staff reviewed multiple ordinances, both within the region as well as within South Carolina. And the ones that we most looked at were Clemson and Columbia. The following municipalities currently have a rental registry. So Clemson, Rock Hill, Columbia, Woodruff, Aiken, Casey, Newberry, Greenwood County, and Sumter. They all have a rental registry or some variation. They calls it a little bit something different, but in essence, it is a rental registry. We also took a look at some of the numbers as far as the impact that a rental registry had on the rentals in those municipalities, being Clemson and Columbia. Clemson adopted theirs in 2010. The average rent for 2009 in Clemson was approximately $683. In 2014, it was $729. In Columbia, they adopted their ordinance in 2016. In 2014, the average rent was $833. 2018, it was $878. So both of those municipalities, that is a less than inflation increase in rental costs. So we did not see an impact regards to.
Cliff, is this all type rentals, or is it
Yes.
structured just a certain percentage of square feet?
It is all single-family residential rentals.
Clint, I'm sorry, this Octavia. What was you said Columbia, and what was the other city?
Clemson.
Okay.
That's Octavia.
And so the substance of this ordinance establishes a registration for all residential rental properties, being single family or multifamily, and it really provides staff, in essence, a contact and a local representative that we can reach out to, given any emergencies, any issues, anything involved in that. So the codes that are applied. This ordinance does not change any codes that are currently applied to single-family and multifamily homes. The City of Florence Code of Ordinances, the Unified Development Code, Building Code, the International Property Maintenance Code, the Landlord and Tenant Act, Fair Housing Act, all of these are already in place, and so we are just using those documents as the backbone of this ordinance. Each property is required to receive a rental permit. So if you own one property or 100 properties or 1,000 properties, you are required to get a rental permit. That rental permit fee is $25 flat, regardless of how many properties you own. There is an exception where a business license is exception, which we'll talk to later, where if you own 4 or less homes, you are not required to get a business license, but you are still required to get a rental permit. Part of this process, which I think we've had a lot of questions on, are the inspections, property certification. The city, we do not have the staff, and we're not going to require an inspection prior to giving a rental permit or in between those that lease the property. So we are allowing the property owners to sign a waiver essentially saying that my properties meet all these ordinances and it's up to code and we have no issues. If they have any questions or if they're concerned with that, they can certainly ask staff, and we will conduct a complimentary inspection up to 2 times for a property, per property. So we will provide that service if there are any questions regarding their being up to code, but we will allow the property owner or the representatives to state that that property does meet all of the codes. Occurrences are will be what essentially will get assigned to the properties if there are any violations, and we do need to make it clear that those violations are any of those that are related to the condition of and or occupancy of the premises. So these are violations that solely relate to the building and the property. And I'll run through typically how an occurrence can get assigned. So if we receive a complaint from a neighbor or a property owner or the tenant that there are issues, be it a hole in the floor or what have you, we would first issue a notice of violation. So what that essentially is putting that property owner on notice that you have an issue and you need to correct it. The violation, it depends on what the violation is as to how long we allow the property owner to correct the issue. Typically it's 14 days or 2 weeks. Do what now? 20 days. If at the end of that period, if they do not correct the violation, we will then issue them one occurrence. We will also, issuing them an occurrence, we will give them an advisory notice that their property does have a violation, and that is one of the 3 occurrences that are allowed in a rolling 12 months before the rental property could be up for being revoked. So after we have assigned that occurrence, and if they were to still not correct the issue, then at that point we would take them to court just as we would normally, and we would go through that procedure. If the court decides that if the issue's not needed and there's no correction that needs to be taken, then we will remove that occurrence. If the occurrence is correct, even after the judge decides that that property owner needs to correct this issue, if the property owner corrects that violation within 30 days, we will then remove that occurrence as well. So as long as the property owners are correcting these issues, we will remove those occurrences.
Mr. Mayor, one question. So basically, you're telling me they'd have 50 days to correct the issue if they're, so basically 2 months almost.
That's right. And if it's, the example of a bad roof is always brought up, and especially right now with how busy all the contractors are, we are asking property owners to take action. And that doesn't necessarily mean start hammering nails and removing shingles. That's getting a contractor lined up, showing movement in getting that violation corrected.
So it's not, those time limits that the pro tem referred to aren't time limits for the completion of the repair. They're time limits to have engaged a contractor or have made affirmative steps that you're moving on repairing the issue.
That's correct. Usually what occurs is we'll issue a notice of violation, and that property owner generally starts to take action on that. And so we will continue to work with them, checking in with them every 20 days to make sure that they're continuing to work towards that. And then at the time they start correcting the issue, we would no longer contact them, as long as we would check the property, make sure it gets completed, but we would no longer contact.
Let me ask another question and tangent with the pro tem's question. You've told us that the codes that would be enforced by this mechanism are existing codes.
That's right.
Those existing codes, as I recall, when we adopted them, pertain overwhelmingly to habitability issues. You gave the example of a failed roof. Okay, I think there's perhaps a misunderstanding in the community and certainly some concern as to if that really is the case, or whether these ordinances go to aesthetics and paint color and that kind of stuff, or whether they are the building codes and so forth that deal with these habitability issues. Can you speak to that?
Yes. So, and I have a slide later on that will show some.
Perhaps I've jumped ahead.
No, that's fine. It's a very good point. We are looking, and we have now placed this within the ordinance, that the codes that we are looking at are the conditions that directly affect the occupancy of the premises. There are unsafe conditions, which holes in the floor, exposed wiring, major concerns that could cause bodily injury, essentially. We are looking at those habitable components of a building, be it hot water, all of those things outlined within the Landlord and Tenant Act that a property owner must provide. We are not coming in to make sure that if the paint is chipping on the front porch, that's not our concern. Our concern is the safety and welfare of the residents.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no problem. So once you have received 2 occurrences, we will issue another warning letter and let the property owner know that within the next 12 months, if you receive a 3rd occurrence, we will at that time take measures to revoke the permit. And I think this certainly needs to be clear. If you own 50 homes throughout the city and you have one property that you have, let's just say you've completely neglected, you're still renting it out, but that's the only property that you're having issues with. All the other 49 properties are in compliance. There are no issues. That is the only property that we will revoke the permit on. So a property owner will still be able to continue to rent their 49 other properties, and once they correct all the issues at that 50th property, they can then once again start renting that property out. So within the ordinance, we have outlined an appeal process. I will hit on a little bit if there are any major questions involved in this appeal process. We have the attorney here.
Excuse me, I've got a question. I just got a message from someone who was trying to log in via Zoom and said they're just listening to music, that they have not been allowed in on the Zoom call yet. They're saying they're waiting on the host to let them in.
Yes, they're in the waiting room right now. Are they watching the live YouTube?
No, they're just being given to music, is what the message was given to them.
I think the mechanism here, and Randy and Daniel will correct me if I'm wrong, but as we've done with all the other Zoom meetings, is the presentation that staff's making right now is visible to individuals on the YouTube channel, okay, on the city's YouTube channel, and how does one access that? So what I'm told is if you go to YouTube, search City of Florence, then this presentation that Mr. Moore is making will come up. And people who are watching that can hear Mr. Moore and also hear the questions and discussions from members of council. Like, for example, when Buddy had a question earlier. At the point in which staff has completed their presentation, then we'll move to the public comment section of the meeting. And what we'll do, as we've done before, is Danny will allow one individual at a time to come into the Zoom conference. Then at that point, that individual not only will be seen on the YouTube channel by everybody watching, but we also be seen and heard by the members of council and the staff. Questions will be exchanged, answers will be exchanged, and then that person then will exit the meeting, Danny, and then the next person in line will come into the Zoom meeting. So those of you who are waiting in the so-called virtual waiting room to come into the meeting, you can still watch what's going on through the YouTube channel, and then when your time to speak comes, then we will acknowledge you and you'll participate in the meeting. Have I explained the technology correctly? Councilman?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. I think there are some people out there who were not aware of the process, perhaps, and I think they perhaps had an expectation that they would be able to watch it via Zoom, as opposed to watch it on the YouTube channel. So I'm trying to let folks know as best I can, and I hope that the explanation also lets people know.
Well, and I understand that what was publicized is that folks could call in to participate in the meeting. Folks did that, and we have a list of those folks. That explanation that I've just given was given by staff to those folks. And so hopefully they've received it now, and then if there are any of you who receive texts or anything, you can share that. They can watch via the YouTube channel, and that at the appropriate time in the meeting, Danny will call them in to participate in the Zoom meeting as a Zoom participant.
Thank you. All right, so starting the appeal process, if for any reason, be it zoning, a person could, there's the probability that they may not receive a rental permit for zoning issues, such as an illegal duplex, somebody splitting up a home without notifying the building department, or it being regulated in that zoning district. So there are multiple avenues in which that you could be denied, and it's very similar to the current process in which a business goes through right now. So if you are a gym trying to open up a gym, you would go through the same process in which the rental management companies would go through, as far as making sure that these properties are in compliance with both zoning and building codes. The implementation, we are looking at implementing this June 30th of this coming year. What this will do is, one, allow staff to work with all the stakeholders, all the property managers, property owners, in showing them the method in which to obtain the rental permit, as well as obtaining a business license if they are not already getting a business license. A lot of these property management companies already get a business license for other activities in their business. So speaking to occurrences, it is certainly the city's intent to not be overly detailed in the items in which we are assigning occurrences to a property. We are looking for habitable issues. The next photos were given to me by city staff of current issues that we have in the city. These are residences that people are renting, and these are examples of those issues and concerns that are going unaddressed, and that this ordinance would help us remedy and work with the property owner in correcting. So
Now, for example, that photo is a violation of existing code.
that's right. This is a violation. Both of those photos are violations right now. We have exposed wiring with the overhead light, and then it looks to be where a shower is currently located on the backside of a shower, where there must have been a long-term leak that has caused the flooring to fail, and the backboard of the shower, and the property owner corrected the water issue, allowing the tenant to get water. However, they did not correct the exposure of the underneath the home. Here's another example. We have a failing roof in a property, which is the top left photo. In the bottom right, we have, this is the laundry room of a home where the floor has, there must have been a previous leak or a roof leak of some sort that is not only adjacent to the breaker box, but it has, the floor has collapsed. And again, these are, again, issues with failing floors where some of these were probably leaks, and the owner has or has had the flooring removed, or it has completely failed in the top left case, and nothing has been put back to correct the issue. So we want to talk a little bit about the departmental impact. This registry will impact every side of the city. With the building department, we foresee an increase in inspections. Again, we are providing the service of a complimentary inspection for every property if the property owner wishes to do so. If there are any concerns or violations that the building department has to get involved in through community services, at that point they're going to bring in the building official or an inspector to take a look at that and identify whether or not that is truly a habitable issue, or if it is something like we said, chip paint or a leaking faucet, which do not have habitable concerns but are not violations. Community services, again, this is going to ramp up the complaints and some of the calls that community and codes enforcement receives. They're also going to have to collaborate with the various neighborhoods as they do now, and with the neighborhood meetings, and go through all of this with those neighborhoods. The fire marshal, we do expect to see some additional fire inspections. This would mainly pertain to multifamily structures. Right now, they inspect the common areas of a multifamily structure, and as we move forward, get those complaints, we'll see increased inspections on that. The administration portion of this will go through the planning, research, and development department, as well as the finance. So if you receive, when you go to get a rental permit, you will go to the planning department just like any other business to receive your rental permit. You will have to build the registry, and then of course finance will work with the property owner or the property management to receive the business license. Police, we look to have to increase at least one codes enforcement officer to help us respond to some of these issues and concerns within the area. One of the benefits that, both double-edged sword, the benefits and one of the increased calls that we're going to receive is with public works and utilities. So right now, one of the large issues that we have are set outs. So if someone gets evicted or moves out, and the property owner sets all of the household debris that was left in the property to the curb. We do not have a contact right now to reach out to tell them to get whatever maybe construction debris or what have you. We have no contact for that right now. We have no means to charge that property owner with those fees that go along with those set outs. We're going to see increased pickups, as well as we anticipate those homes that have either leaking services with their water to work with those property owners to start correcting some of those issues and work with them. So what we have for this display is the codes violation in correlation with the rental properties that we have in the city. It is overwhelming that we have our codes violations located in those areas where it's primarily rental properties. In North, West, and East Florence, generally all of those communities are 70% rental properties, 30% home ownership. And so you can see the correlation between those codes violations that our folks deal day in and day out with and where the rental properties are currently located. This is a map of the crime and the rental properties. And again, it is in direct correlation with the high volume of rental properties in the city. Same with property crime. The timeline, just to end the presentation, if council so chooses to adopt this rental registry, it would then go into effect at that 7 days after. However, we would not require the business license or rental registry to begin June 30th. We would, during that time, we would reach out to stakeholders, other property owners, speak with them on answer any questions and develop the process in which to register all those properties and build that registry. It would also allow us the time for any property owners that have any concerns with their properties, whether or not they meet codes, to start those inspections.
Please.
Well, do we know the landlords that we're having issues with? Is there any number of them that come in and out, or is it a group of 5 or less that are really causing our problems in the city specifically?
Specifically, there are certainly those areas and property owners that we know of and that are
Habitual offenders?
Yeah, that have habitual violations applied to their properties. We certainly are aware of those. And so at this time, I'll conclude my presentation and allow discussion. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Very well. One thing, and we didn't, you didn't flesh this out, Clint, but I want to speak to, you mentioned the fact on the business license side. Set aside the registry issue for a second, but on the business license side.
Yes.
You mentioned a couple things that I think are of note. One is that some entities and individuals are already paying a business license for property management. So, for example, as I understand it, if you're a property broker or a realtor, for example, and you have a realty firm and you're also doing property management, those entities are already paying a business license, and their property management revenues are included in that business license that they're paying already because they're paying because they have to as a broker.
That's correct.
And also, I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what we're talking about and how much a business license is. As I recall, and Mike,
Yes.
you may speak to that, but it's $2.50 or 55 cents or something like that per $1,000 of gross. Am I right about that?
That's Generally correct. So we have an example that we always like to give. If you have 100 units and you charge $1,200 a month for those units, that's an annual gross income of $1,440,000, which business license is based on your annual gross income. So for the first $2,000, you are charged $80. For the next per thousand up to $1 million, you are charged $2.55. And then for the remainder of that, over $1 million, you're charged $2.29. So it comes out to be, for those, that example of gross revenue of $1,444,000, you would pay a $3,634 business license fee.
Let's do it the reverse way. Say I'm the tenant and I'm paying a $500 a month rent. Okay, so that $2.55 per thousand becomes like $1.25 per $500 a month rent payment. Is that right?
Yes.
So if I was the landlord and I wanted to pass that business license cost, assuming I could do so, I wasn't already charging a higher rent as I could collect, if I have the profit motive, which I do, I probably am. But let's say I could pass it on. That would be a translation of an increase in cost of $1.25 on a $500 a month.
That's correct.
Okay. Questions from membership? All right. Hearing none, Mr. City Manager, who's the first speaker? Members, they are staff is working on introducing the first. Gary. Members, they are staff is working on introducing the first. All right, Gary, is that you?
Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Is that,
Am I the first speaker?
you're the first contestant. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Gary, we've just had a presentation from Mr. Moore about the ordinance. I know you're well familiar with it. You are here live.
Yes. And thank you. I did not get all the presentation, and so I apologize if I'm duplicative. I did send out a letter by email to your city email addresses this afternoon with, and I would kindly request y'all review that letter. Of course, I, as well as a number of other individuals, do not support any portion of the business license fee or the registry. In our opinion, the landlords are already taxed for their rental income through property taxes. The property tax that we pay is based on the value of our property, and our property is valued not necessarily based on the cost to build it, but the rental income that it derives. When we negotiate with the tax assessor on the value of the property, they always ask, what's your rental income? And that is how the property value is based. So, to some extent, that is double taxation. That will not be the first time it occurs, but I simply point that out to you. In regard to other aspects of the ordinance, in my opinion, much of the ordinance is unnecessary. The city has already adopted, as I point out in my letter, the International Property Maintenance Code. That code contains many of the same provisions that the proposed ordinance does. In my opinion, there needs to be a very thorough cleaning up of the document the ordinance that's proposed based upon the, I'm going to call it IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code. In my opinion, I do not think council, staff, or quite frankly, any of the folks in my group can intelligibly discuss this without having a copy of that document before them to review. And to some extent, I think when folks realize that you've already adopted the IPMC, that eliminates a lot of the concern that we have. In my opinion, though, the city needs to enforce the document that is already adopted before passing this other layer of what I'll call bureaucracy. In addition to the IPMC, the Residential Landlord Tenant Act is a document that works very well. I know that some members of council have a concern that not all tenants know their rights. And I suggest the city providing a grant to the local legal services office to conduct training clinics or possibly representation to qualified individuals for landlord-tenant matters as it relates only to property conditions, not necessarily payment of rent. And finally, I would point out, as far as other tools available, that there is a statute, and that's noted in my letter, that allows the solicitor to actually close certain properties when there have been repeated criminal activity or breaches of the peace on that property. Without going into a lot of detail on the nuts and bolts of the ordinance itself, I'm concerned about the provisions related to criminal activity. Those that do not allow a good property manager to divorce themselves from being a local representative when an owner does not cooperate. I have some concerns about the board that is set up to hear the appeals or the notices of the appeals from the notice of violation. I have some concerns with you requiring a local, what I'm going to call a local representative, and that will truly drive up the cost of rent. And I'm going to digress for a minute. You know, in my opinion, so long as you have the name, address, phone number, or email of a responsible person, in today's time, they don't necessarily have to live within 50 miles of here. If you require them to hire someone, such as a property manager, then that will certainly increase rent by at least 8%. So I know there's been a lot of emphasis on having a local contact person, but I think the emphasis should be on having a responsible contact person, regardless of how close they are. In my letter, I address a number of other issues. I have spoken with several council members, and they have said, well, look, Gary, we just don't know if this thing is going away. What sort of compromise do you envision? And, you know, I have prepared what I consider a less drastic rental registry. And in the letter to you, that was supposed to be attached. It was not. I am on the road, and so was only able to email that draft ordinance to a few of you. And so I don't know if anyone else can send that around, but I would kindly request you consider some of the language in that. If the rental registry is adopted, I do believe it provides some compromise in that regard. And I, as I know others, are certainly willing to work with council and staff in resolving a lot of issues. And I do think, and I know there'll be others that arise after it's adopted, if it is adopted, you know, to enforce. So I appreciate y'all's time and input, and I know everyone's being introduced to this at this meeting, and I sort of look forward to the discussions that follow in the next week and maybe the next meeting, as this is just an introduction to some of the issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Don't go away quite yet. I think we've got members who have some questions, but I do want to speak to, I did receive this afternoon the proposal that you forwarded to the council. I and staff have not yet had a chance to review it thoroughly, but we certainly, with interest, will share that with the entire council. And I know you can't, at this point, I'm sure, speak for the Realtors Association, but from your perspective, Mr. Finkley, is that proposal that you sent over something that you support?
That's certainly something. Well, you know, you are very good. You're trying to pin me down, and I'm gonna weasel out of it. Again, my position is, I would prefer there not to be a business license fee or a registry at all. However, I would recognize if I do not have the sufficient votes to defeat, you know, something from being adopted, I think my suggestion is something that it resolves some of the implementation concerns that a responsible landlord or property manager could, you know, live with. And I would support it. If I don't have the votes on council to avoid a business license fee or a registry, then that is something I would support as a compromise. So I hope that answers your question without wiggling. And I don't speak for the Realtor Association. Greg Hendricks in my office could probably speak better for them, but I'm just a member and, you know, whatnot. And I sent them the same email proposal this afternoon. And so they're looking at it, and I look forward in this next week to discussing it with them as well. So maybe at the next meeting, I can come back and answer that question with a little more assurance or certainty.
Fair enough, and I recognize that I know that this perhaps premature, but Councilman Jabal has a question. Mr. Finkley, Councilman.
Yes, thank you. Gary, I know the document that was presented to us for our consideration with reference to the International Property Maintenance Code. And in your letter to us, in your comments just now, you said that the International Property Maintenance Code that's already been adopted by the city eliminates a lot of the concerns. And I'm curious if you can, if you're in a position to highlight any of those issues that you think the International Property Maintenance Code that's already in place addresses. Are you in a position to highlight any of those for us?
And Councilman, I'm sorry. The Zoom computer was telling me to unmute my mic, and it kept saying it over and over. So can you please repeat that? And I apologize. I didn't mute myself. It just automatically happened. I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right. I have no problem with that. What I was saying is that the International Property Maintenance Code that you've referenced has been adopted by the city, and our ordinance makes reference to it, and your comments and your letter say that there's some duplication, and that the International Property Maintenance Code eliminates some of the concerns that are addressed in the ordinance that was presented to us. Do you have some specifics you can highlight for us?
I do, and I hate to tell you this. I left my book in my truck. I'm in my wife's car because it has internet capability. So, the IPMC deals with the notices of violation, the form of which the violation should be written up as, the service of the violation. It deals with some of the procedural grounds. It deals with the appeal process, and it obviously deals with the substance of the maintenance of the property. But you know, in addition to it handling some of the or resolving or addressing some of the issues that are in the proposed ordinance, I think any ordinance that is written has to be written with consideration of what's already in the IPMC, so they'll go hand in hand. Right now, I'm not certain how well they work together. You know, my perception is it's almost like it's two separate documents, and there's not as much interaction between the two as there should be. And I know you've got a competent legal advisor there to help with some of those issues, but regardless, I really think that the city attorney needs to look at that and give that some consideration. But yeah, the IPMC takes care of a lot of those procedural issues, and I understand, and we can still tweak the IPMC. Particularly, I know there's a concern with the appeal board and the composition of that board. from a practical standpoint. So, you know, it can always be tweaked and be added to, and I did that when it, as it relates to some things. Hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. One follow-up question to draft ordinance that you came up with and forwarded to us, which we have not had a chance to review. As the mayor said, it'll get forwarded on to city staff and to our city attorney for their review. What I hear you saying is that you've attempted to try to integrate to some extent the International Property Maintenance Code into that proposal. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, I have. And not only that, Councilman, it's sort of like, I know with you and the mayor, when the judge tells you to write an order ruling against you, you know, so I have written an ordinance that I think satisfies your concerns based on the IPMC and the issues that I've heard from the mayor and the council, which is also a compromise as well. So that's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very well. Mr. Finkel, thank you for being with us. We're going to, unless you have anything further, we're going to move on to the next participant.
Thank you.
Very well. I think the next participant, Mr. Barnett Greenberg. Is he in now? All right. Mr. Greenberg, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
And you are here live now, broadcasted to the public, and all the members of council and staff can hear.
Yes, can you hear me?
All the members of council and staff can
Yes, can you hear me?
I can't. I'm having a problem.
He's got his.
Okay, great. Hello?
I'm not.
Should I just go ahead and talk?
It usually, if everybody will mute their phone, their video also.
That's right. If everyone will mute their video and Greenberg. That's right. If everyone will mute their video and Greenberg.
Yes. Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay, great. Sorry, we were having an issue the first part of the Zoom meeting. We missed most of it. Trying to hear everything. There was some kind of technical difficulties.
We can hear you.
I'm not hearing.
But can you hear me? Sorry. I'll just keep talking. I guess that's the best way to do it. We're worried, or I'm worried, that the ordinance will have various unintended consequences. Thank you, councilmen and women, for letting me speak to you today. I really appreciate it. This is going to, hurt development in the Florence City area. I agree with the intentions of, the good intentions as far as helping tenants and holding accountable landlords, but we feel that there's already ways for that to be achieved through Landlord-Tenant Act, and also what Gary Finkley was alluding or describing. And so we're worried about, obviously, we want people to take care of their properties and for tenants to be treated fairly, but we feel like this is, there's already, laws on the books and things that would resolve these issues. And so this would, passing something like this could discourage and keep out of town and out of state developers from investing in the city of Florence. And it penalizes current landlords and investors and discourages future investment, I'd say most of the investors in the area are smaller, like mom and pop investors who will be affected. And it's just going to make it more expensive for landlords and have more involvement from the government, which will lead to higher prices for the landlord and thus the tenants. So those are my concerns. That in the ordinance itself is a 12-page document, a small font, and it has a lot of other things in there that are concerning that don't really, I don't feel are necessary. A lot of things in there that would be scary if enforced, because it would, from feedback I've gotten from different people, as far as like making a landlord evict a tenant, for obviously if they're committing criminal activity, they shouldn't be. And typically we're using leases that have, that they're not supposed to be committing criminal activities in the property. And if they were, that would be grounds for eviction or, the violation of the lease. So I feel like a number of things in the document are redundant to what we already have that could deal with these issues. So that's, in a nutshell, my viewpoint. Thank you for letting me talk.
But thank you,
I'm
Mr.
not sure if you could hear me.
Don't go quite yet. Let me assure you, and I know there may have been some confusion on this, there is no element of this ordinance that requires the eviction of anyone. As I understand it, there is a provision that provides that if a landlord has a tenant that by some act, whether criminal or not, has caused a violation of the existing law with regard to the habitability of the property, the tenant has torn up the floor. The tenant has torn up the roof. Then when staff confronts the landlord about the violation of the regulation, the landlord can respond to that by saying it was caused by the tenant, we've evicted the tenant, and we've addressed the issue. There's nothing in the ordinance that requires any eviction, and to the extent there's any confusion on that, I want to make sure that's clear. I do have, though, Mr. Greenberg, we've talked at length about the existing laws, the existing property management, International Property Maintenance Code, the other Landlord and Tenant Act, and other existing laws with regard to habitability that we're seeking to enforce. One of the mechanisms of the enforcement is to have a registry, a list of property owners, so we can communicate with those owners with regard to whether they are complying with existing law. Do you oppose a list, a registry of owners?
I can't speak on behalf of all the realtors. I'm not in a position to, you'd need to talk to someone who's in a position on the Realtor Association. I am a realtor and a broker in charge in Florence, but I can't comment on behalf of everybody, so I'm not sure what my answer to that is. And we'd have to talk. A group of people would need to talk probably to come to an answer for you.
Okay, thank you. Further?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg, and thank you for participating.
Thank you for letting me in. Y'all take care. Thank you.
Very well. I think our next participant, at least according to my list, is Mr. Greg Hendrick. Mr. Hendrick's not on. Of course, he's in the law firm with Mr. Finkley, so I'm not sure whether Joey McMillan from Caldwell Street, I guess it's still Caldwell, or is it just Caldwell Street now? Joey, what is it? Are you with us? There's Joey McMillan. Joey, we have your video, but no audio. I'm told you're connecting slowly, Joey, so just bear with us.
How about that?
Excellent. Good afternoon, Mr. McMillan.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for having me on. This is a very unusual council meeting. But thanks for listening to my concerns. And Mr. Mayor, thank you for talking to us several times on this. We really appreciate your what you've done for us. I'm the broker in charge of Coldwell Banker McMillan and Associates here in Florence, and I'm not a big property manager. I manage a few properties, but I do have concerns about the rental registry. And I just want to I'm not the past two you've had have been lawyer. No, Barnett's not a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a property manager, and I just wanted to be able to tell how this would affect our business. And I was working on a piece of property trying to get it right for some out of town owners. And at that time, Mr. Mayor, I was sitting down having a meeting with you, and not too far from where we were having a meeting, I had a property that was so out of compliance, I couldn't even begin to tell you. And I thought to myself, I said, you know what, if it comes up that Joey McMillan is managing this piece of property and he's meeting with the mayor on properties, that would look horrible to me. So I just called the owner up and I said, I'm sorry, I cannot help you anymore. Let me get you in touch with somebody else. And that made me think that if we have this registry and we have properties that I don't feel like are right, I may not want to get them right. I may not want to put myself out there to get them right. And I'm concerned about that because I want to help people and I want to get things together, but I'm afraid this is going to cause so much paperwork and red tape that people are just going to stay away from properties that, quite frankly, you need some of our expertise in the pool of tradesmen that we have to fix them up, to get them ready for people. And I'm scared that's going to be an unintended consequence of this. And I'll tell you, Mr. Mayor, you've heard my stories before, so you might be a little bored by it. But I had a piece of property down the street from us. I was trying to get the power cut on. And it took me 6 weeks to get the power cut on because I had to have a city inspector go out there I had to get an electrician to go out there, and finally I got it turned on. It was fine. But the fact that the city can withhold power from structures if they so choose to, that's just one of the many, many things that the city can do without passing this ordinance. And I want to mention one more thing. I'm respectful of the time and all the people waiting. I spoke with a contemporary of mine in Columbia, and they've got this rental registry. It seems that he says the people that work at the city love it. He goes, all the property managers can't stand it. And just one example, if you can imagine, well, if you can kind of take Columbia and Clemson, parts of it, they're college towns. And so they have a little bit different problems than we have. And as a property owner in Columbia, one time I did own a piece of property and students parking in the yard. You've got 4 students living in a house and they all got cars and whoever else, and they park in the yard, and they don't like that in Columbia. And he said they kept parking in the yard, and the city inspector would come to their company and go, you need to get these people to quit parking in the yard. They'd send them a letter, they'd still park in the yard. Send them a letter, still park in the yard. So finally, the property management company just got so sick of dealing with it, they just evicted them. Now, they were paying their rent, but of course, parking in the yard was against their lease. But I'm just afraid this is going to have so many consequences where people, property managers that are trying to do the right thing, are just going to get tired of dealing with it and move on to the next thing. There are very, very slim margins in property management, and that's all I'm qualified to speak on at this point.
Joey, thank you for being with us. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I assure you that our goal here is to deal with bad actors. But I think I can speak for all of us when I say we recognize that you are not among those bad actors, and we want to be sensitive to your concerns and make sure we don't throw out the good apples with the bad, as it were. So thank you for being here with us, Mr. McMillan. And is there any questions or comments for Mr. McMillan? Joey, thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't get any hard questions. Thanks, guys.
All right, I'm told the next person in queue is Ms. Nell Falkins. Ms. Falkins. We're waiting for Ms. Falkins to respond now.
Am I on?
You are on. Good evening, Ms. Falkins.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Wakila and members of the City Council for allowing me to speak.
We can hear you now, and you're being broadcast to the public, and all the members of council and staff can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Nell Folkens, president of the PD Realtors Association. Others will be discussing various issues with the ordinance today, but my chief concern as a realtor and a Florence resident is that the ordinance will most likely leave a significant number of low-income renters homeless. They're paying all they can for rent, especially during these trying times of the pandemic. Additional fees will be assessed to the landlords, and in light of the certification of code compliance in the ordinance, the inspections and repairs necessary to pass the code under this ordinance could be significant, the cost of which will be directly passed on by the landlord to the tenant. This is, in effect, a lasting tax on renters. The tenants won't be able to afford the increased rent, and investors will be less likely to provide affordable housing in the city of Florence, like Joey was stating. Where will the tenants go? Live with family members? What if they don't have any? Who can take them in? My fear is they'll be homeless. Also, if a property is shut down by the city until repairs are made, where will the tenants go? Who will house them? The unintended consequences of this ordinance are many, and I urge your rejection of the ordinance, or at least work with us to come up with one that we can both live with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkins. Please don't go yet. Councilman Jabali has a question for you. Councilman, you're muted. We can't hear you, Councilman.
Yes, I was, and I'm unmuted now. And I appreciate now you're bringing the point up about if someone, what happens to the tenant if a property is uninhabitable and that property gets shut down. That's been a concern, I think, of many people. What happens to those people who no longer have a place to stay because the property was uninhabitable and the repairs are necessary? And this is, I guess, in following up on your question now that was raised, Clint, has staff addressed that question at all? And I'm turning that question back over to staff to see what staff has been contemplating in that regard. Is Clint with us there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
The example we always like to bring up when given those questions is the hotel that was located on Irby Street. About, I guess it's been 2 years ago now, there were extreme violations to the point in which it needed to be demolished. And at that time, how many individuals lived there? Yeah, so there was an excess of 200 people living in that hotel. And so we had to condemn the building. There were many concerns and issues with the safety, especially the health with that building. And so we brought in Mayor's Coalition and others to help work with these tenants, the 200 plus, to get located in temporary housing at first and then permanent housing in the long run. And the many organizations that are within the city working through the Mayor's Coalition is the mechanism which we'll use if at any point there are structures that are entirely uninhabitable and a new home for them needs to be found.
Follow-up question on that, Clint, is we're going to generate this business license fee is going to generate a pool of money. Has the city staff considered the potential of using some funds from that to address this interim housing that might create some funds available for the specific purpose of assisting the tenants who are in that unfortunate situation? Is that something that can be worked out as a component of the utilization of any business license fees and the permit fees that are generated.
Let me.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Randy.
How you doing? There has been several discussions about approaches that can or may or may not be taken. One of it is just that, and that is using some of the funding as contributions, if you will, to our third-party partners to assist in either rental assistance, temporary housing, or whatnot. We haven't obviously developed a final plan, but that has been part of the considerations.
So that, and thank you, because that was my question, is that one of the pieces that are in the works in terms of, because this is now, we're just starting this process of working on this document. And so I'm just wanted to get clarification that the funds that are going to be generated can assist with addressing housing for some of these people who are affected by that.
I believe that's absolutely an option, and that would be something that we'll be having conversations with council and staff to try to determine.
Okay, thank you. And Nell, I think that was one of the questions that you had raised, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have for you now. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Ms. Falkins.
Mayor,
Councilwoman.
yes. A
Councilwoman.
question, but I noticed that we have, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that we have all the good guys speaking, the ones that's doing the right thing. Where's all of our slumlords and slum management companies who let rooms cave in on people, who don't provide heat in the winter, who only have 1 or 2 outlets working in the houses, and people are using drop cords? Where are all the ones that don't care if a person dies and that house is uninhabitable in the first place? That they're the reason. They're the ones you should be blaming pretty much for this ordinance. We have to make sure that people are safe. And that's the important thing. That's the thing that I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about your needs also, how you feel, the expenses the expenses that may be incurred. But I also want to hear from, I want these slumlords.
Councilwoman.
They need to be out of business. They don't even need to exist.
I know that you have tried to reach out to some of those who are known to us, but I don't understand that you've had any response from those folks.
No, they give me all kinds of excuses. Oh, I'm busy right now. I'll get back to you. I have a lot of people in the office right now, and if they hear these comments right now, they don't know who they are. And by next time, if I don't hear from some of them, I'm going to call names on our next workshop, because it's awful that the good have to suffer. But as we always was told growing up, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch, and that's what's happening right now.
That's right. Well, I think what we do all recognize, though, and I think, Councilwoman, you recognize this as well, is that Nell Falkins, who we've just heard from, is certainly among those good property managers and represents the Realtors Association and is known to us to be someone who is interested, who is compassionate, and wants the best for the community and for both the landlords and tenants. And I also know Nell shares my view that while we're concerned about homelessness, we're concerned about the hungry. But the need for affordable food doesn't justify a grocery store selling rancid beef, nor does the need for affordable housing justify a landlord renting a house.
Hearing from all the good ones, where are, let's get those others out there, shut them down, and all the good ones take over those properties, so we won't have this problem. It's really unnerving, and it's really agitating to me that people have to live in that squalor.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Councilwoman Irvin.
Yes, I simply want to acknowledge that over the weekend I received some calls from tenants who had received letters that had comments on there to the ideal that they're promoting the ideal that the city would be raising taxes. And I think that at this point, raising rental price, their rent. So I do want to acknowledge that I was thankful to talk to the citizens, and I did clarify and let them know that the city does not raise rental properties prices. That is up to the landlord. So even down to some who received some emails earlier during the summertime. And so for me, when you look at that map and you see that the largest percentage of these rentals are primarily, as stated, in Northwest, as well over in the East Florence area and North Florence area. My concern primarily is when you look at those homes, what we're doing now, revitalization, is that most of these areas have not had new homes built in them until the city's pretty well now starting to have that seed where we have some private investors being involved. I can speak to a fact. I can tell you there's one home that I knew my mother rented when I was a little girl. And I'm telling you, I'm not a teenager anymore. But that house has not had anything done to it until probably about 3 years ago that someone came in to do some work with that. There's still properties that's being heated by kerosene heat and wood heat. So there are a lot of safety issues associated as well. So I want to say for the people who have gotten rental properties, updated them, that is the things that we want to happen. But when you have homes like the one you see there, and there's a lot of those homes in these areas, they need to be addressed. So for the property managers who are doing the right thing, I commend you. But on the same token, there are fellow members out there who are not doing the right thing. And we have to address that. And I believe that this is an issue that was taking place even before I became a council member. And I came aboard since 2010. So this here was an outcry before 2010. So 10 years have passed and nothing has been done. Key thing again, nothing. It concerns me that when an issue comes up and it's been being worked on by the city all this time period and no one sought to put input in it. And I will state what I've told some of my fellow realtors and others, that when you introduce something, that's the foundation. If it needs to be modified or changed, it can be done. But it's been over 10 years and we need to have something to make for a better life here in the city of Florence. And I just want to be sure to have that stated on the behalf that we need something to help citizens. And for the ones who are doing the right thing, I would appreciate just as you've given information, that you continue to support that we need to have a rental registry to protect you as a good landlord as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We have a few more people who are waiting to speak. I think the next one is queued up. Am I correct? Miss Cynthia. We're trying to cue her in now.
Hello?
Miss Stevens.
Yes, hi.
Hello, this is Stephen Wakila. You are live here with the council and live before the public, and staff can hear you as well.
Great. Well, my husband and I, along with our son, are currently renters due to an unforeseen illness that left him disabled and in a wheelchair and living on disability. Our desire is to become homeowners once again. But if you all pass a bill to increase fees on landlords with an understanding that those increases will only trickle down on renters, well, as my husband always says, if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. Families such as mine who are not on public housing assistance or food stamps will suffer greatly. Our hopes, like many other families in the Florence, South Carolina area, will be a dream deferred in owning a home again, because we're on a fixed income and we just cannot afford any more increase. It'll basically leave us no room to not only save, but just buying groceries will be a struggle. So in closing, you all know there are other avenues that the town can obtain assistance, such as targeting state and federal funding, perhaps forming public and private partnerships, or simply taxing all businesses across the board. In an unprecedented time as these, when COVID-19 is still killing masses of people, we all need to work together and find a solution that will not negatively impact basically just the lives of thousands of renters in Florence area. I sincerely hope and pray that you all take into deep consideration the comments I'm sharing this evening and do not pass a bill that would drastically impact my family and thousands of others during this already difficult time. I appreciate you listening and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
You're welcome.
Mr. Douch, are you with us? The next speaker is Mr. Gary Douch. He's ringing him in now. Mr. Douch. Gary. Bear with us while they patch him in. Mr. Douch.
Hello, yeah, am I on?
You are on. Mr. Douch, you're on with the City Council, and city staff is here, and you're also being broadcast via the city's YouTube channel. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Of course.
I'm a realtor in town. I work with Coldwell Banker, so I work with Joey as a real estate agent, but I also own some rental property in town. And this rental registry concerns me. There's several things about it that concern me. First thing is the forum by which we're talking about it, I don't think is a very good way to do this. I think we need to have some actual public meetings, and I know that's difficult right now with COVID. So I would ask that the council maybe consider postponing it if there's no other way to get everybody together. Because I think there's a lot of people that aren't going to participate in a Zoom call or Zoom meeting and may would like to have their voices heard. The next thing I wanted to say is that I think that the ordinance as written is a little bit too intrusive. It's kind of cumbersome. It's going to add another layer of bureaucracy for landlords and property owners to deal with. And I think it's kind of punishing the many for the sins of the few. As Councilwoman Moore said, and I think you said, there's some bad actors out there. And I definitely think that those bad actors need to be dealt with, but I think this ordinance is just blanket, going to cause problems for all the property owners and all the landlords. The other thing I have an issue with is the business license requirement. I don't think it's fair that the owner and their property manager are going to have to pay a business license. I think that's double dipping in a sense. And that's just my opinion. I know there's reasons why you guys think that we should pay a business license, but I think there's some valid points as to why we maybe already are paying our fair share. Mr. Finkley alluded to the high property taxes that are levied on rental property. And unless and some of you I know own rental property, and you know that it's quite high. And that's an issue that started with Act 388, and that's another story. But I'm also concerned with the language of the ordinance, and when it's dealing with occurrences, it doesn't really say how the occurrences are investigated. I don't know if a tenant can just say, hey, my landlord won't fix my water heater, and then we can expect to, does somebody actually go out and inspect the properties? I'm not sure. It may be buried there in the language of the ordinance, but I didn't see it. And then the last thing, I don't want to take up too much time, but I also agree with Mr. Finkley in his comments that I don't think it's fair that the ordinance forces an owner who lives more than 50 miles away to hire a property manager or some representative. I think there's probably a number of property owners that live at Myrtle Beach or Columbia and own rental property here and probably do a fine job of managing it. So I don't see why they need to be forced to hire a property manager. I think it'll maybe, make people consider not investing in Florence in rental property or not keeping a house in Florence because they get extra layers of bureaucracy. And those are my concerns that I wanted to voice, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Douch. I am aware Caldwell Banker pays a business license already to manage property, so that element wouldn't affect Caldwell. Am I correct about that, Mr. Douch?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I know they pay a business license, and I'm not sure what their business license is based on. But the way I'm reading this ordinance, since I own rental property personally outside of Caldwell Banker, that I would have to buy a business license for those properties. And I don't.
Because it manages, yeah. I think that's.
But
yes.
Well, my Caldwell Banker, Joey would kill me for this, but you know, Caldwell Banker doesn't manage my rental property. I have actually another property manager that manages my rental property.
The other line, Gary, you're gonna. Okay, I appreciate that. Mr. Dausch, I know that you recognize, as we do, that there are some bad actors out there. The part of this ordinance involves a rental registry, so we can identify those people and communicate with them. What's your position on that?
I'm sorry, I got a dog barking and a doorbell ringing, and I couldn't hear everything you said, but I think you asked me what my opinion is just on a registry.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I don't have a problem with the concept of having a centralized list of all the rental property owners. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I also think that the city already has most of that information in hand. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys do a pretty fair job of collecting property taxes, and notices are sent and checks are sent in. And I think if you wanted to get in touch with somebody, you have avenues of doing that already.
Well, no, actually we don't. And that's what essentially this is about, because unlike property taxes, when we are dealing with a landlord that's ABC Corporation out of Delaware, we don't have any way to communicate with them. And that's important for us, because so often those folks who are the bad actors are those who are concealing their identity, and they're paying their property tax, but they're not maintaining their property in violation of our codes. And so the purpose of the registry is for us to be able to identify those folks and communicate with them. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overburden this conversation or to prolong this discussion, but that's an important point, I think. Yes, sir.
Well, and I agree, and I think that's a point that would be better discussed in another venue other than this Zoom call. But and I know you guys have met with other people in the realtor community and the management. Everybody heard about this until recently, so I think the communication could be a little bit better, and hopefully a little cooperation on both sides.
Well, and I understand communication is important. It's important to this council, though, to know your view. And so the last word is, what is your view on the real registry? Is that something you support or oppose?
I oppose it as it's written. I would be open to a compromise, but as it's written, I'm in opposition of it.
Thank you, Mr. Dausch. Thank you for your time, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Who do we have next?
The last caller is unknown.
Okay.
Well, we're going to bring her in.
All right, we have a last caller who's asked to participate. This is not someone who went through our system, but is unknown to us, but we'll certainly let them in and hear from them. Hello, are you there? Last caller who's asked to participate. This is not someone who went through our system, but is unknown to us, but we'll certainly let them in and hear from them. Hello.
Hi, this is, you can't see me, Trudy Nybert. I actually did talk to someone at the city to participate and got a passcode and all of that.
Ma'am, we see your name on the list now, Ms. Nybert. I'm sorry for the confusion.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll be brief, but I will tell you that I want to say that I'm, as I've been listening to the meeting, and first off, let me say thank you for taking the time to listen to me. So the whole time I'm listening to this meeting, I feel like no one for the renter, the person who's got to live in this home that is not a good home. So I wrote some things before, and I'm going to read those, but I have a host of things that I'd like to send via email for the city council to peruse, because I've got more written down about this meeting that I watched than what I wrote beforehand.
Ms. Nybert, before we go further, you can do so. In fact, I think, Chief, if she goes to the city website, there are different emails that she can send information to the city and the city council via. Okay, Ms.
Yeah, yeah. I may do it in a letter form because it's a lot. So let me read to you what I wrote. It'll be pretty brief. I want very much to see this rental registry put in place. I was a renter until I purchased my home here in Florence. Luckily, I had landlords who were both tenant and responsible property owners. This is not the case for many residents here in Florence. Owning a rental home is a commitment, not just a cash cow. Keeping any home in good repair benefits the owner as well as the neighbors. Without a rental registry, it is impossible for the city to address basic code violations, let alone serious ones, with the property owner. Neighborhoods can thrive or fail depending upon their livability and the upkeep of properties. And it's funny, Mr. Mayor, that you had mentioned Delaware. One of the cities, and I've brought this up multiple times I live in Maple Park, in the Maple Park neighborhood meetings. I lived in a small town called Smyrna, Delaware, okay? It's made some of the top lists of places to live. And they had a rental registry, and it was very easy for not only the renter to know their responsibility, but also to know what the responsibility of the property owner was, okay? Some very basic things. Y'all talked about a hole in the roof. Well, roofs that didn't leak, heat, potable water, and no exposed wires were the 4 basic things that they had to provide. And if they couldn't provide it, you were provided with an alternative place while it was repaired. And they let you know how that your responsibility, because everyone signed up for a water bill. So if you rented, you had to get the water in your name, and you got handed a packet of rights and responsibilities. Okay, so it does work. I think it probably does add some cost for the property owners. I'm not going to deny that. But I heard Councilman Jabali make a brief comment in answer to another question about what are we going to do about the people that are forced to move out of an uninhabitable home to repair it? Well, who wants to live in an uninhabitable home in the first place? No one. And they shouldn't have to. So I urge you to pass this. Now, I have some concerns. I read through and trying to sort through the codes, and I think I'm a pretty with it person, all right? Trying to sort through the code about maintenance and whether that's optional or not and that sort of thing. That was difficult. It's a lot to read. And I'm going to tell you that the majority of people that you're talking about here that are renting are not going to either have the wherewithal, the ability to read or research, maybe even have access to a computer to find out this information. And I don't think it's enough to give them counsel at an office where they may have to go and find this out with somebody volunteering their time as an attorney. Too many people, not enough help. So you've got to do this rental registry. It's imperative that the city looks at growing. And in terms of will people invest, Smyrna was not a big place on the map in Delaware when I moved there. And it is now like one of the best places to live, not only in Delaware, but in the country. So people do invest even though you have these things in place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nybert. Thank you for the council. Councilman Jabali, I think, please don't leave yet, Ms. Nybert. I think Councilman Jabali has a question.
Sure. Yes.
Councilman, you're muted still, I believe.
Ms. Nybert, I want to thank you for your comments, and I want to echo your comment, particularly about those homes that are rental properties that are uninhabitable, and how wrong that is, and how that is the focus of the essence of what we're trying to accomplish here. And we've talked about bad actors out there who are habitually keeping these properties in a state of disrepair and uninhabitable condition, and that's the focus of it. And I wholeheartedly agree that needs to be addressed, that is something that we need to implement very clearly. And I just want to thank you for your participation and for your passion and for mentioning about this town of Smyrna, Delaware. Maybe there's a lot that we can learn from what they have successfully put in place. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Ms. Nybert. Any further from members? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
All right. Is there anyone else waiting to speak? All right, members, that concludes the presentation by members of the public. Of course, as we said before we began this meeting, this is not a meeting where we're voting on anything. This is purely to receive input. I'm sure we'll continue to have conversations with the public and between ourselves in the coming weeks. And this matter will be discussed by council at least a couple more times over the next month to 45 days. And we'll look forward to continuing that process. If there's nothing further, then is there a motion we adjourn? Without objection, we stand adjourned.
Clint, thank you for putting that together.
Thank you, Clint.
Thank you. Have a good evening.